Welcome to Core Concepts. My name is James Renford Powell. I'm your host, and we created this show to bring an opportunity for many people to come and talk about their path, whether they are religious leaders, spiritual leaders, or one who has gone through the so-called dark night of the soul, as St. John of the Cross talked about. We go through difficulties in our process, and we think that this has been an extremely interesting series, and hope to continue with it because we don't feel like we've anywhere near covered it. If you go to the internet, you can find information about virtually any kind of religious belief system, but on Core Concepts, we feel that you can find things that you wouldn't even know to look for. So the Core Concepts lecture series, in our view, has been a great success, and we're enjoying it and finding it very interesting. And if you mix the human interest stories of the people who have been revealing to us their past with their stories, and with their information about the belief system, we ask them to tell us what they believe, why they believe it, and what they're doing about it. In other words, how did they come to that belief system, and how it's manifesting in their lives. In the core document, which is a book I wrote some time ago, I give the same kind of information about why the Church of Revelation was formed. That's COR. It's a very unusual organization in that you don't join it. Anyone can come to meetings and be involved as associate members, but to be a full member, it's a matter of reading and answering the questions on 3 books, one being the core document itself, the other being a book called the Metaphysical Bible, and a third one called the Mysteries Revealed. Also, there are 3 degree levels of study at the Institute of Applied Metaphysics, so one who wants to be involved with the Church of Revelation can look for ordination by completing the 1st degree level of that study. So there's a bit of a connection here between the core document and a book that I've been working on that hopefully we'll have in print by the end of this year, called the Core Teachings. So the core teachings, the core document, and here we have the core concepts. There is a connection. I'd like to tell you a little bit about that today. The Core Teachings book is written where you could read it like an ordinary book, or you could as a reference, or you can follow the color code. We've taken a wide variety of different belief systems and religions, and we look at what the Vedic writers said about each one of these 13 principles. And if you follow that color code, you can see what the Tao Te Ching said about that one, what the Prabhupada said about it, what Jesus said about it in the Gospels, what the Zen masters said about it, the Sufis, Islam, and all the way down to the present time. So the idea there is that each individual, if they're really serious about understanding each one of those principles, that in one way or another, through that process, by the time they finish it, should be able to identify and verify that principle in something that's happened to them. So Core Concepts was designed to bring the individual teachers and people with their paths to the screen to tell you what their belief is, why they have that belief system, and what they're doing about it. And the Core Teachings book is to go into more detail about each one of those principles, and the core document explains the purpose and design and structure of that. This is what I'm keen to bring to you for your consideration and for your comments, and we would be pleased to have your writing or your email contact. You can contact me by emailing IAM-Renford, RENFORD, @gmail.com. You can call. We've given the number a number of times, 901-487-9483. 9365. That's a cell phone. That's mine. I will get it. I will respond to any comments and suggestions that you might have about this show. And we hope to broaden and expand it as we continue with core concepts. This journey for me began, and I've talked about it on occasion, began when I was a missionary in Vietnam in 1966. And being there, and this was, you might say, my dark night of the soul. This was my process of discovery. And this was an awakening for me, which was jarring and rather painful. And it took some time for me to adjust to it. And I see this among people, and some of the people who've been on the show have talked about moving from Christianity to Judaism, and from Judaism to Islam, and from one organized religion to another. And for me, this was like shifting from one set of doctrine and dogma to another. All right, it wasn't getting to the core, and so that's where the term core teachings and core document and our core concepts come from. What is the heart? What is it about all of this? All of the churches and all of the religions have numerous rituals, teachings, and stories and illustrations. And when we've gone back to look at what the master teachers, the original teachers did, you see them talking about those little stories, explaining them, but each one of them around which is wrapped this principle. This story is kind of folded around a principle that is being expressed. I've said on a number of occasions that every time Jesus opened his mouth, he was explaining or illustrating one of these 13 principles. Now, when I began to find these, the analogy I give is you're in a gold field, with a brook and water or a creek running through it, and you're looking down at all the stones and the things in the bottom of the creek, and you see that one little bit of gold sparkling up at you, that one little bit of nugget. And this was what I began to find when I began to study a number of these different religions. It wasn't the story of the individual. It wasn't the story of Buddha's life. And Buddha was the son of a king, and he was taking all of these things. His life was quite different from the carpenter's son. Confucius, all of the teachers had their different origins, so I found very little parallel in the personalities of the individuals. But what I did began to find the correlation from was these principles, these pristine principles that were in that creek of life that I began to pull out and look at. And they were frankly disturbing, because if you are brought up in a particular religion, in that tradition, and especially if it's a conservative one, you were taught generally that this is very, very unique, that there's nothing else like it, and this is a point that most of the religions make, is how unique theirs is. And of course this is no different in Christianity. But my objective in all of this was to find some rapport with my Chinese students, and I was rather young at that point, so most of my students were coming from the University of Saigon, the School of Living Languages, where I was studying Chinese. They were coming from martial arts centers, from ping pong palaces, anywhere I was meeting young people in my age bracket. A lot of those in my age bracket in Vietnam were draft dodgers. They were Chinese who were trying to stay out of the South Vietnamese Army. So there was often an opportunity to meet and talk with them, but in out of the way places. And in this process, I wanted to be able to establish rapport with them, to have some understanding of where they were coming from, because if you can't do that, then you have nothing in common. I mean, their objectives generally were to learn English at as low a cost as possible. So at that point in time, I had a Chinese-English Bible correspondence course, and they could read the Chinese and they could read the English, and we could talk about it, and they were learning the language that way without having to go and pay for that. Of course, as I was studying Chinese, I had to pay for my classes and go back and take the exam at the University of Saigon School of Living Languages. In this process, I would find certain statements of principle, whether it was from the Tao Te Ching or the Dhammapada or other writings about Buddha or the Analects of Confucius. And in finding those statements of principle, I really went back to school when it came to what Jesus said about things, because I was running that comparison constantly. And in fact, I'd go to my wife and I'd say, look at this, who do you think said that? And I would read her a statement and she'd say, that's Jesus. I say, no, that was Buddha. And maybe later I'd come back with a statement and say, what do you think about that? And she said, that was Jesus. I said, no, that was Lao Tzu. So eventually she told me that she didn't want to hear any more of this. So we got, so I passed on that. But the process had begun. And there is a famous statement that a mind once expanded can never be contracted. And once the door is opened onto something like this, it's hard for any inquisitive mind to leave it that way. You want to follow it through to until you've come to some kind of conclusion on that. And over a period of time, even though this was beginning to be upsetting to me, over a period of time I began to increase that number. And I've joked about it about how I thought I was a genius because I didn't know anybody else that doing anything like this. But it was years later that I did read Aldous Huxley's Perennial Philosophy and the writings of Charles Hanel, The Master Key, and found other people who were talking about various and sundry of these principles. Sometimes there are writers who would write exclusively about one universal law. For instance, the law of being. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi wrote a book called The Science of Being and the Art of Living. Later I came across Charles Fillmore's book, The 12 Powers of Man, which each one of these innate powers that he's talking about that are ours are part of that universal law of being. So I was finding writers from time to time who were writing about one or more, and I began to pick up on it. Once you've identified a principle and you've been able to verify it from your own life experiences, then that becomes real to you. It's no longer a theory. It's no longer a doctrine. It's a reality. It's an experience. And so this continued until I reached the point of 13 and could not add to it or subtract from it. So I established that principle of 13 and have worked on that ever since. This was the beginning of what now is over 40-year exercise. And not always was I reading a spiritual related book. Sometimes it was something that was related to business or to success or to something else, and I would find that principle buried right there in the middle of it, an intrinsic part of what I was reading, what I was studying. The 13 universal principles I have put into a series of affirmations called the Renford Affirmations, and on occasion I've spoken at different places where I use nothing but this to go through and talk about. Our moderator on the Laws of Material Wealth Personal Development Program and the one who created the Renford Broadcast Network, where you may be viewing all the Core Concepts lectures, has created a video with the same series of affirmations, and anyone who sends an email, IAM-Renford@gmail.com, I'll be sending you the link to it, and it makes for a wonderful little meditation session. The pictures are taken from the Hubble telescope pictures, and background music, and then the affirmations. And for the rest of of this little session, I want to go over with you specifically. Now, a lot of people have heard me talk about the universal laws, and not so much about each one specifically, because we're talking about 13 principles here. And all of them are interconnected. Some of the teachers have called them all part of one overall principle, and that is the principle of creation, or the law of creation. And you can see why that this would be so important in a book I wrote called The Laws of Material Wealth, because creating anything, from creating the world to creating wealth, creating success for yourself, or creating any kind of organization, this is the same process. The same 13 principles are in play here. And I'm going to read the Renford affirmations for you on screen here today, and then we'll talk about them a little bit individually. The first is, I know that anything I can conceive and believe, I can achieve. Every day ideas are coming to me. Every day I gain more confidence because I believe in myself. God dwells in me, and I can access God's power by recognizing my innate powers. Here, 3 of the universal laws are touched on. Anything that the mind can conceive and believe it can achieve is actually a statement that is found in, the first time I found it was in Napoleon Hill's book, Think and Grow Rich. All right, anything the mind of man can conceive and believe it can achieve. So here we're talking about the pure potentiality of mind. We're talking about the law of believing and knowing. We're talking about the law of being, and that God dwells in me and I can access God's power. That's the law of pure potentiality. In recognizing my innate powers, the universal law of being. Right? The second one is, I know that there are certain universal principles or laws upon which all laws, including the laws of physics, rest. I am persistent in my identification of these laws in my life. I am using my innate powers to come into harmony with these laws of life. I know that these laws are the divine self-expression, and that through understanding them in my life experiences, I can be still and know God. So here we have several of the principles touched on again, that these universal laws, including the laws of physics, rest. I am persistent in my identification of these laws. This is the process that we're talking about in the Laws of Material Wealth program and all the other programs. The whole first level of the Institute of Applied Metaphysics is dealing with this process of identifying and verifying the universal laws in our life experiences. But the statement then continues, I am using my innate powers, that's referring to the law of being, to come into harmony, which refers to the law of balance and equalization, or harmony, with these laws of life. I know that these laws are the divine self-expression, and that through understanding them in my life experiences, this is the law of evolution and unfoldment. This is the process of identifying and verifying. I can be still and know God, because these principles are literally aspects of God, our universal being. I see all problems as challenges that simply require a learning process. This is all having to do with the law of evolution and unfoldment, this process of learning. I love them because they exist in divine love for my benefit. Right. We talk about the law of attraction, and the real meaning of the law of attraction is not so much about attracting wealth or having a $2 million home or any of the other things that are often mentioned by personal development coaches. But in this principle, we're really talking about the inner being, the I am consciousness, drawing to itself the experiences it requires in its process of evolution and unfoldment. And this is what this particular affirmation is referring to. I see all problems as challenges that simply require a learning process. I love them because they exist in divine love for my benefit. These are catalysts that cause us to move in the way that we need to go to learn what we need to learn. The next quote is, the essence of God is in me. This is a statement of the law of being. All right? And I am pure potentiality. This is a statement of the law of pure potentiality. Every thought I have creates. I am aware that I can create destructively as easily as I can create constructively. Therefore, my every thought is observed as if I were outside looking in. This is self-observation. I talk about on the show, the Laws of Material Wealth Personal Development Program, the 4 pillars being identification, verification, observation, and meditation. So observation of self, observation of others is an important part of this process. Negative and fearful thoughts are immediately apprehended and brought into the light from the dark corners and hidden caverns of my mind. In their place, creative and constructive thoughts are building the edifice of self-knowledge and understanding, which is my birthright. And this is our birthright, this process. And these problems and these obstacles that we face are in fact catalysts that move us in the direction that we need to move. I know that there are no limits upon the abundance that is available to me except those that I place upon myself. This is a pure statement of the universal law of abundance. God didn't create anything in small quantities. Everything is in abundance, affluence. And everywhere, the same amount of electricity that's available today was available at the time that Ben Franklin was flying his kite. Right? But we are learning to apply more and more. There is abundance of it as most natural resources. I know that there's no limit upon the abundance that is available to me except those that I place upon myself. This is where the limits come in, is what we place upon ourselves. I am releasing all thoughts that restrict or limit me. I am attracting all the skills, people, and materials that I need to fulfill my primary purpose. These assets, now the primary purpose there is referring to another universal law, and that is the law of righteous self-interest, our primary purpose, what we're here for, discovering and working with who we are and what we are here for. And then, of course, the law of attraction is mentioned there because I am attracting all the skills, people, and materials that I need to fulfill my primary purpose. So you will find these principles interwoven in the affirmations. These assets and attributes are daily being placed on the infrastructure that I have created in thought. And going back to the law of pure potentiality, I am manifesting what I have imaged in thought. I know that I am not alone, but part of the absolute unity of all. Another one of the universal laws is the law of absolute unity, which is diametrically different and really opposed to the concept of duality, of God and his angelic host on one hand and the devil and his demonic forces on the other, in a giant battle for the hearts and minds of man, the whole earth being this battleground, is a concept that is put forward by some religions and some more than others. I know that every action has a reaction. This is the law of relativity. I know that all is connected. Therefore, there are always consequences of my thoughts, attitudes, and actions. I observe this and daily create an ever-expanding positive force. I am giving of myself. Another one of the universal laws is the universal law of giving. Some call the universal law of giving and receiving, and it is the inflow and the outflow. I share my wealth, time, and knowledge, and the cosmos rewards me in multiples of my giving. It is inevitable that I receive when I give, because this is an expression of a universal law. Another one of the 13 principles. And they are all interconnected. And there have been and are writings, dissertations, lessons just on how all 13 of these universal principles are connected. I know that no matter what I give or receive, there is only one essential ingredient. And this ingredient is the makeup of God. It is love. and the biblical text tells us that God is love. Every time I share my knowledge, wealth, or time, I am giving packets of love, packets of God. Love is all that I have been given, and it is all that I can give. I give love freely and daily. And here we're talking about the universal law of giving and receiving, and about the universal law of love. I know where I am, who and what I am, and what I am capable of. I know that my capacity for energetic activity, creative thought, and love are endless, and that my energy supplier, universal being, is infinite. And within that one statement, there is the law of balance and equalization, the law of pure potentiality, the law of love, and the law of being. So you'll see that these are interwoven in between. And the last quote is, I take responsibility for what I have and will create. I know that what I create in thought and give the power of emotion to will be manifested. I am in every way creating my life. This series of affirmations, as I mentioned, is now electronic, and you can get those. You can get a hard copy or an email copy if you write. But it is a process of rebooting. Now, whenever you go to you have a problem with your computer, and the first thing you do is you call your techie and you ask, well, what do I do? And he's going to say, turn it off and turn it back on, reboot it. Why? Because it can reset. It resets in the way that it's supposed to operate most of the time, and the problem is solved. But what we need to do when it comes to these principles, when it comes to our studies, these core teachings, is to reboot. All right? And we can do that simply by reading these quotes. And I've asked my students and those who are doing this to read it for 27 days, preferably the first thing in the morning and the last thing at night. And then come tell me nothing has happened. I have yet to have anybody come tell me nothing happened. I read these for 27 days and nothing happened. All right? Things start happening because once we reboot, once we change the method there, then we begin to pick up on and to recognize these principles in our life experiences. I've promised all of those who start this process of rebooting, because this is the first stage. The second stage is to identify and verify each one of those principles from your life experiences. But in this first stage, that if you do that, there will be a rebooting, there will be a resetting. And then if you work on this process of identifying and verifying these laws, the three promises are as follows. One, it is self-verifiable. So you don't have to like the books, you don't have to like the show. But this is something that you can identify and verify for yourself alone without any assistance. You don't have to go to the mountaintop in Tibet and contemplate your navel. You don't have to enter into cloistered convent or go anywhere and do anything out of the ordinary. In fact, you're asked to continue your life exactly the way that you're doing it, because in this life, what is being attracted is the learning experiences you require. No advantage in running away from life. And this is something that you have to do for yourself, by yourself. There's no shortcut. Okay? So you go through this process of identifying and verifying the laws, and it is something that you can do. It is self-verifiable. The second promise is that if you will do that, if you will identify and verify each of these principles from your life experience, you will never be walking down the street wondering what hit you. You will not be sitting in a coffee shop wondering, in a befuddled state, what's going on in my life. If you're in the coffee shop, you'll be enjoying your coffee and maybe planning your next move, but not sitting there in a befuddled state. Why? Because if you've identified and verified each of these principles from your life experiences, it's something that you know. It doesn't mean that you know everything. It means you've opened the door to intuitive knowing, which is far greater than what you can know from your conscious understanding. But by starting out with this process of consciously recognizing, consciously identifying and verifying each law, then a great step has been taken and a door opened to intuitive and long-term understanding, so that you don't have to come back from work each day and sit there and try to figure out which law that you've seen in play. You may do that at first, but you will intuitively know, and you will know on the spot when those situations are occurring. You will know what principle is in play. It's still fun for me to go listen to a speaker or read a book or whatever, and I make my notes on every book where the concepts of the 13 principles have been expressed. And it's always a pleasure for me to see where someone has written a book of some consequence because they have, in that book, identified and verified at least some of these principles that I'm talking about. The third promise in there is that you will never go listen to a speaker, you'll never read a book, go to a seminar or workshop, or even have an extended conversation with someone that you don't know where they're coming from. How will you know? It's not that it's putting you in an unfair advantage over them, but and certainly I'm not suggesting that you tell everybody that you know, but I am saying that if you have identified and verified those principles, you will know when you go to that seminar, that workshop, or listen to that speaker or read that book. You will know where they're coming from. You'll know whether it's largely based on academia, what they've studied and learned in school, or whether it's coming from doctrine and dogma from their religion or whatever, or their belief, or their non-religion, whatever it is, you will recognize. And you will know where they're just blowing smoke. That's the advantage for you. And I hope that you will continue to view the Core Concepts lectures now with some understanding of what the impetus was for establishing the program, what the core document is about. Go in and read it. It's a free download from IAM-COR.org. You can go to www.IAM-COR.org and you can download the free ebook, the core document. You can download In Search of the Searcher's Roadmap, which is a bit about the philosophy. You can view the courses that are available in the 3 degree levels of the Institute. This is a virtual campus. You can also download the Lightways e-zine. It's an electronic magazine. But by all means, download the core document and look at this very unusual organization that has been established so that the individual's interest is not superseded by that of the group. All right, this is an important aspect of that program. And by all means, look at the other sections of the core of the Renford Broadcast Network where the Core Concepts lecture series is, because we have the Bookman Show, we have the Music with Meaning, the Renford Theater, the Laws of Material Wealth Personal Development Program. All of these programs are on the Renford Broadcast Network, and Core Concepts being now, I believe, over a year's worth of shows. All right. And also go to blogtalkradio.com/Renford. That's blogtalkradio.com/Renford. And there you can find the 10 shows of Radio by Renford. You can find the lessons from the Laws of Material Wealth Personal Development Program. You can ask for the support material, which will be sent for you. All you have to do is ask, and it will be emailed to you. And then you can follow back to from week 1 through, at present, I think it's about week 32. There's a 54 weeks of that support material. This program is sponsored by One Community, by the Institute of Applied Metaphysics, by the Church of Revelation, and is being filmed at the Church of the Sacred, or rather the Temple of the Sacred Gift in Bartlett, Tennessee. And you will be with us again next week for our guest on Core Concepts.